everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com.
Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Eric, checking in from Austin, Texas. Today is Wednesday, August 8th, and this is episode 184. All right, so for today's episode, I have a really cool interview to share with you guys. As I mentioned last week, I'm going to be talking with Naomi Hattaway from I Am a Triangle. So I've got a couple of quick news and updates items to cover, and then we're going to get right into the interview. So first up, this week is the first week of August, and so we've got new Air France Flying Blue promo awards that are available. These are for awards booked between August 1st and August 31st, and for travel between October 1st and November 30th. So for most of the destinations, you've got a 2-month window for your travel. Keep in mind that Air France's frequent flyer program Flying Blue is a transfer partner of all 4 of the transferable currencies. So if you have Amex, Citi, Chase, or SPG, you can transfer them to Air France and take advantage of the promo awards. If you're not familiar with these, promo awards are discounted award tickets that you can purchase for select city pairs. So every month or so, Air France announces a group of fares, and so they usually have either a 25% discount on the normal price in miles, or sometimes they have a 50% discount as well. So this time around, there are not any significant 50% discount items. However, there are some pretty interesting opportunities from North America, especially from Canada, which isn't especially common. There haven't been a ton to Canada recently. So we've got New York to Europe via Paris Orly only, which is 25% off in economy. Vancouver to Europe is 25% in economy. Vancouver to Europe is also 25% in business class, as is Calgary and Edmonton. Those are the notable ones from North America, but I've got the whole list linked in the show notes. So definitely take a look, and do keep in mind that these award tickets are on a limited availability basis, so they will sell out. So if you're interested in any of the cities you find now, you should probably try and get this booked in the first couple of weeks of August, because otherwise the promo awards, often there won't be any more of them left. Okay, next up, we've got a couple of different ways that you can earn miles. First up, a super easy one. Lufthansa Miles & More is offering 500 free miles if you download their mobile app. So check that out. Probably not worth doing if you don't have SPG points or Lufthansa miles, since SPG is the only program that transfers to Lufthansa. Unless you fly with them a lot or credit your miles to Lufthansa from Star Alliance, probably isn't worth the trouble. But it's a nice set of free miles if you don't have their mobile app. Next up, we've got on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's a huge bonus, although probably not realistic for most people, for Qatar Airways. They're offering 500,000 bonus miles, 500,000, if you fly all of their inaugural flights between August 1st and March 30th of next year. This is probably not going to be attainable unless you are location independent and just looking to travel, but could be kind of interesting. Don't think Qatar miles are super worthwhile, but I thought the promotion was kind of interesting, at least worth a quick mention. Next up, we've got one that actually does seem a little bit more promising from Marriott, which gives you the chance to earn up to 45,000 points a year by interacting with them on social media. Some of the low-hanging fruits here for just getting started: you can earn up to 750 points with Marriott for connecting Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can also get an extra 250 for following on Instagram and Twitter as well. And then there'll be each month there'll be new bonus ways to earn points. So if you're active on social media and don't mind following some promotions on a monthly basis, you can bump up your Marriott rewards. This could also be a good way to keep points from expiring if you've got Marriott points, or if you've got SPG points that are at risk of that. When you have expiring points, most programs will reset the clock on the expiration date if you have any account activity. So a lot of times these promotions are most useful for that if you've got a bunch of points but don't happen to have a card that earns those points, and so the balance has been stagnant. This could be a good opportunity for that as well. Last up, we've got a big bonus from Aeroplan. They are offering a 35% transfer bonus from hotels. So there are a few different hotels that can transfer to Aeroplan. SPG has a really good transfer rate. With this bonus, 20,000 SPG points are going to get you 33,750 Aeroplan miles. That's a pretty good deal, although I love SPG points, so I would make sure that you actually want to use Aeroplan miles for your next booking before you make that transfer. This only runs through August 21st, so you've got to make your move relatively quickly. Marriott and Hilton also can transfer to Aeroplan, but the rates are generally not as good. This is one where if you're pretty confident that you're going to be able to use the Aeroplan miles, they can book on Star Alliance and have pretty reasonable rates, more or less comparable with United's prices for most regions, but the taxes and fees can be a little bit higher. So something to take a look at. Could be a really good value for some folks. And then last up on the transfer bonus, we've got a 20% bonus transferring Citi thank you to Cathay Pacific Asia miles. We haven't talked a ton about Cathay Pacific. Cathay's program is distance-based. They're in One World Alliance, which means that their miles can be used to book flights on American Airlines, British Airways, and the rest of the airlines in One World Alliance. So this could be an interesting opportunity. In particular, Cathay's award chart can be really good for business class round trip for certain distances. So I've got a link to a pretty interesting article written by Drew over at Travel is Free that talks about some of the opportunities with Cathay Pacific. So if you're thinking about potentially converting some Citi points at a bonus, that's a really great resource to take a look at. That's going to do it for news and updates. We're going to hop over to the interview. Again, all of the links for today's episode are at abroaders.com/184. All right, so my guest today is Naomi Hattaway. She is the founder of a community called I Am a Triangle. And I was really excited to feature this interview because this is an online community that I think covers a ton of bases that we don't cover at Abroaders. The I Am a Triangle community is designed to provide support, encouragement, and friendship for folks that are either currently living abroad, that are planning to start a long-term adventure abroad sometime soon, or folks that have just returned home. Naomi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Eric, thank you so much. It's truly a pleasure, and I think this will be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we start? Tell me just a little bit about the beginning of I Am a Triangle. How did the idea to start this community come to you?
Well, it's interesting because the idea of the community actually came by virtue of a need that I saw that needed to be filled. We lived overseas as a family in New Delhi and Singapore, and I neglected to prepare for repatriation, which is the act of coming home. And I, of course, use home with air quotes around it because that's a whole nother discussion. But I didn't prepare, and I didn't know that I should have. And so when we repatriated back to the United States, I found myself quite lonely and feeling alone, feeling like I didn't fit in. And my mom, who is a missionary in Africa, she shared this concept with me around identifying what it feels like to have been in a different culture and then to come back home. And it resonated with me. And so I wrote a blog post about it, and that blog post went viral. And in an effort to respond to all of the comments and emails that I was getting from other people around the world saying, me too, I started the community as a way to provide support. And quite honestly, because I couldn't manage their stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I can completely identify with that feeling, and never was able to really put a finger on it, just sort of like some post-travel sadness, you know? And so I thought it was really interesting, and I loved the blog post, especially the little drawings on envelopes. Can we talk? Can you just kind of share the story about the circles and the squares and triangles?
Sure. So yeah, it's funny because those drawings I did with a Sharpie, and I think that they're probably there to stay forever. I won't ever make them more pretty.
Oh, they're perfect as is.
Perfect. So the basic gist is that when you live in your passport country, and this can be anywhere in the world, we're not just talking about Americans, it's as if you're a circle. Everything makes sense to you. The politics, religion, culture, celebrations, holidays, time zones, seasons, all of that is something that's ingrained in your being. And when you move then to your host country, and it also doesn't have to be another country, it could be on the opposite side of your home country. That's like a square, and nothing makes sense. Different culture, different celebrations, different food, different words, different language. And once you start to kind of adapt to that new square society, you lose some of your circleness, but you also can't ever truly become a square. And so this concept says that you then are a triangle. And where that comes into that kind of post-travel sadness or the feeling of this, I'm a misfit, happens often when you go to then your next culture or you return home, because a triangle literally does not fit inside of a circle. So that's the basic story behind those shapes.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Tell me a little bit about your community and your thinking on kids, because I thought that was an especially interesting part of the blog post. The kids are sort of sponges in that they really haven't formed quite as much of any preconceived notions about the way things should be as adults. I think you reference kids as sort of like stars. Can you tell me a little bit about that, and specifically what kinds of questions come up around traveling internationally with kids in your community?
So it's interesting. I had not thought of the use of a star to define children. It came out of people's comments as they were saying, I think that my child fits into this as well, but I would call them a star. So it kind of, I think it's overlapping triangles, kind of. There is a great book called Third Culture Kids by David C. Pollock and Ruth Van Raken. There's a third edition coming out soon, but it talks about the kids and how a cross meshing of cultures really does develop a third culture almost. And I think that exactly what you said, kids are sponges and they kind of they go along with whatever their caregivers say that their life is going to be. But in that, the taking of their parents' culture, their home culture, their host country's culture, and then even expanded into friendships and at school, they just become this myriad of experiences that's really quite beautiful. The thing that we talk about a lot in our community, though, is parents and caregivers feeling guilty for taking their kids away from what is known. We have a lot of discussion around once a child gets into secondary years and into high school, is it safe? Is it okay? Will they end up on a therapist's couch later? To which I always say they may, but it's not because you've taken them overseas. And I think that caregivers and parents are they want the best for their children. And sometimes it's hard to know whether introducing them to a life abroad and to different cultures is the right way to go. And I personally, for me, I always say 100% yes, as long as it's something that is talked about openly within the family.
Yeah, I definitely, I can see how much benefit there could be to having those other perspectives. I definitely wish that I had a chance to travel more when I was younger. I got sort of a late start, and I'm envious of kids that have sort of multicultural upbringings. I always thought that was a really cool thing and something that I would love to do with my kids.
Absolutely.
You guys have, I kind of went through the forum and I was just astounded by the broadness of different topics that were being discussed in there. Lots of stuff about places to live and, really serious and sometimes sobering or, even sad questions or comments. And also, really inspiring things, and then very practical things like, hey, look how I strapped this bottle of wine into my sandals, so it doesn't break. And that one actually I saw that and I was like, oh God, because I just had a bottle of wine break on my most recent trip back and just ruined everything in my bag. So I was like, okay, next time strapping it into a sandal.
Right. Wasn't that funny? I love that.
So, are there anything, I know that I noticed a lot of them about places to live, and there's definitely some content about things like, getting integrated into society, whether that's work or school. Are there any patterns in particular, anything that you think is interesting to share or maybe that surprised you that has come out of the forums?
I think I've been most surprised by people's immediate trust and vulnerability with our group. A lot of times I will approve a new member request and we do some serious vetting. So it's not just an open free for all, but someone will join the group and within a matter of minutes of being a new member, they'll share something very deep and personal. And we do have some psychologists in the group that have said to me that there's a beautiful phenomenon around the belonging that people immediately feel to be able to trust us with their stories and with their situations. What's really amazing is that because we're a global group and we're 24/7 and people are literally around the world, we typically only have a matter of minutes of separation between someone asking a question and people joining in with support or advice. We do have, like you mentioned, a lot of discussion around locations, questions on, is this a good place to live or should I look at this? We have TriConnects, which is what we call our subgroups. So those are city specific. And that's where we really encourage people to join when they are looking at a certain location. The other thing that's really cool about our community is we have people from all walks of life. So we have backpackers, we have world schoolers, we have Mercy shippers, we have high-level CEOs and their families. We have military from all around the world, all in one sandbox. Everyone's playing nicely together, and it's just really neat to see people learning from each other and expanding their horizons in our community.
Yeah, I think it's also really impressive, to be able to maintain such a big community. Obviously, there's sort of a critical mass that you have to get to where you have enough people that have enough experience in aggregate that you really can get those sorts of discussions and get people who really have the answer to a question that's being asked pretty quickly. So I thought that was just super cool. What are the biggest challenges of running a community like this? And also tell me a little bit about your decision to move from Facebook to I Am Triangle and have, your own community.
Yeah. So the biggest challenges I think are around culture. We believe strongly in kindness and empathy. And so it changes, like you said, as the numbers shift and change. When we add new people, there's always this time frame that we've come to learn is about 3 weeks where they need to understand the culture and what's allowed in our community. And then we coast. We're really good. We don't have issues. We hardly have moments that need to be moderated. The cool thing about our members is we've got people who have been doing this lifestyle for 40 plus years, and they're still willing to come around and help the newbies without judgment, without, any kind of you should know this attitude.
Yeah.
The challenges, though, truly come from trying to run an online community in a space that's big enough to hold the weight of our community. So, like you've seen, there's so much dialogue, so much great advice, and it's all falling into this abyss. And Facebook doesn't currently give administrators any way to capture that. The search functions are difficult. It's hard to let our members find each other. That's one of the biggest pieces of support and solace that our members find is when they go to our TriConnect coffees and they say, oh, there's literally someone who lives around the corner that knows what I'm experiencing. And we can't do that on Facebook. Facebook algorithms constantly push you to like-minded people.
Yep.
And that's completely opposite of what our community is about. So we are making the big move off of Facebook. And there's a collective gasp that goes through the internet when people suggest you leave Facebook, but we found Mighty Networks. Mighty Networks is this beautifully created platform that allows us to do everything that we need and more. So we're excited for that move, and we're excited for the growth, really, of our community. I mean, not everybody is on Facebook. So by that measure alone, by staying on Facebook, we are exclusive. So I'm excited.
That's awesome. I think one of the things also that you just mentioned that, never even really occurred to me, but I can totally see how it's true that Facebook pushes you towards people that are like you and that's sort of their model for how to find people that are going to, get along together. And it's so valuable to have a way to connect with people that aren't like you. That totally resonates. And I can see how that is a challenge when you're trying to build a space where people can find folks that have different life experiences and that can help them understand, something that they're going through or something that they're, a journey that they're about to embark on. So I'm really glad you guys were able to find a solution that's going to help you grow in the direction that you want to.
Well, yeah, and the other thing, like as we're saying, Facebook newsfeed does that, and they've started doing it inside of groups, so that when you've posted, liked, or commented on something, it's typically because it's of like mind. And so that's what we found is happening. If you and I went to the group right this minute, we would both see different things based on algorithms. And it was time for our community members to take back control of what they saw. And the new platform, Mighty Networks, also helps us because we have so many vast categories of discussion. We now can use topics to tag our posts so that people that do not have children or pets can unfollow those topics and never see all of the questions about relocating pets and which airlines allow snub-nosed dogs and all of that stuff. So that's another really cool thing that I'm excited about.
That's awesome. Are there any other resources that you think are especially valuable to folks in your community, either, resources that you guys have created or other ones that have been shared and are just really popular and valuable that we can add to the show notes for today? Sure.
Well, Families in Global Transition is something that I am happy to be affiliated with. I spoke at their conference last year in The Hague. They really are an organization that kind of provides umbrella services to everyone inside of this strange global mobility space. And they are they're international, global. So that's one resource I would definitely point to. One of my favorite books right now is This Is Where You Belong by Melody Warnick. And while it is very U.S. centric, she has not lived outside of the U.S. She's done a lot of moves, and the book just provides really actionable, practical tips on how to settle in where you live. And instead of looking always to what's the next move, loving where you live. So that's another great resource that we talk a lot about in our community. And then I think the third would just be we constantly are teaching our members that we are our own best resources, that reaching out to each other and asking questions, going outside of your comfort zone and learning more from each other. And it's not a linkable resource, but I think it's
sometimes the best ones aren't.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And I mean, that's a huge reason why I wanted to talk with you and share this with our community, because, like I said at the beginning, we're very focused on, the nuts and bolts of how to get to the destination and completely lacking on the side of the experience. We want to empower people to go out and have that experience. And I think in a lot of cases, what sometimes is holding people back is some fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And so to have that support, it's just a great combination to have both the ability to get there, hopefully a little bit less expensive,
right,
and also to have access to people that can help you make that transition. So on the other side, you've got some questions from the I Am a Triangle community about flights and about saving money, points and miles. And I think there's a lot of them that, maybe we've talked about at some point in the past, but they're great ones to revisit. So let's jump in and do some of the questions from the folks in your community.
Yeah, so this is actually fun. It's a fun way to do this. So one of the biggest questions that we get on repeat all of the time, and I would love your insight, is around what is the best day or the best time to purchase tickets? Is last minute really a good time? Is it a bad time? There's a lot of variation around that question, but I think it all boils down to, is there one day of the week or a certain time of the year that's better than others for the best travel deals?
Yeah. And, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about how many, click here articles there are that say, this is the trick. This is the one funny little hack that'll save you a bunch on flights. And unfortunately, it's really not true. I think the one rule of thumb about booking airfare is that if you are going to pay cash, in other words, you don't have any points in miles that are going to work for a trip, that last minute is almost always more expensive. And that's just because the airlines are really good at knowing that people that book flights within, a week or two of travel are either business travelers where the company can afford to pay more,
right,
or somebody that's in some sort of crisis. And that's, kind of a sad type of price discrimination. But, on the personal side, that comes up when there's, something that you need to get back and be with family quickly.
Right.
And, you didn't have a lot of notice. And so I think the one thing to share with your community is that points and miles can be a really good hedge against those types of really high cost last minute tickets, because the airlines tend not to. It's basically the opposite often with points and miles, where last minute, even though they're charging a lot more for the ticket, if the flight is partially empty or even mostly empty, they're also trying to offload some of their liability, so to speak, with the points and miles, since there's not much extra cost to put another person in that seat.
Okay.
And so there can be really good opportunities where, as long as the flight's not oversold, the airline's happy to give you a seat in exchange for points. And so it's a really good way potentially to have access to the last minute stuff. But assuming you've got some additional time to do some research, I think that one of the best sort of just mindsets and frames to start with is, as soon as you know that you're ready to travel, that you'd be ready to book, it's a good idea to just take a look and see what the paid tickets look like. And some of the sites, a couple of people in question seem to mention, different specific sites, Kayak or whatever.
Right.
I really like Google Flights because it does let you set alerts so that you can see how prices are changing in the first few weeks. But again, there aren't any rules that are super predictable, like 6 weeks out prices are lower and then they go up. It depends just really on what the airline thinks they're going to sell and how many seats they have left. But if you start as soon as you're ready to book, and that for some people might be a year out, that might be 6 months out, that may be 6 weeks out. But take a look, see what the paid flights are. And the really good news is, if you do have some points and miles, a lot of times the availability, so the dreaded blackout dates,
right.
You can have a big advantage if you know about your travel plans earlier, because those blackout dates change. So as soon as the schedule opens up, which is usually like about a year in advance, maybe 330 days, the airline will often put a few seats in the inventory that you can book with miles. And so it can help to sort of check early on if you know more than a year out. Once those seats are just sort of released, basically when they start selling tickets, that can be a good time to just check in and see if a flight's available with your points. And then after that, a lot of times prices are going to stay stable for, when you're pretty far out. And so it can make sense to wait a little while and see what happens with the paid tickets, and also see if a chance to maybe use some points that you have comes up that can save you a lot on especially international flights.
Okay, so going kind of on that same discussion point then, what are the best reward and miles programs? I know that we have a lot of discussion with people saying, well, I use this credit card because it does this, and I use this, and I'm a member of this. But is there something that works very seamlessly together to earn points for both at the same time? Or is it, again, kind of a personality or a personal preference?
So I think the one sort of category of points that stand out from all the others are the transferable points programs. And so those would be Amex membership rewards, Chase Ultimate Rewards, and Citi Thank You Rewards. Those are the three bank programs. And then there's also a hotel program, Starwood Preferred Guest. And the thing about those four types of points is they can be transferred to a bunch of different frequent flyer programs at a 1-to-1 ratio. So, for example, your Chase Ultimate Rewards points can become one Chase point can become one United mile. And so the nice thing about that is each of them have somewhere between, let's say, 10 and 20 partner programs. And the problem of the blackout dates is that, if you just have American miles, and those American miles aren't able to book any of the flights that you need, you're kind of stuck. Those points are always going to be American miles. And with the transferable currencies, often you'll have, like I said, 7 or 10 different types of miles that you could turn them into. And for the most part, the transfers are instant. There's definitely some exceptions there, but for the most part, if you see a flight that you want and your Chase points need to become Air France points, or they need to become Singapore points, you can do that pretty quickly and gives you a ton of extra flexibility. And it also helps you take advantage of some of the pricing and complexity. So like an example would be that Air France only charges 50,000 points for a round trip in economy from the US to Europe. And Delta can charge like 80,000 or 90,000 points even. So sometimes when you have those transferable types, you can look and see which price gives you, which program gives you the best price, and then make the change to convert your points into something that's going to give you a better deal. So that's one of the areas we see some of the biggest opportunities. But I think just generally, if you're trying to pick a rewards program, there isn't really a right answer. The most important thing is that you want to just kind of focus on accumulating points. If you're using the bank programs, most of them have a few different rewards cards that you can choose. And we always try and encourage people to not spend more than you normally will. So, credit cards can be dangerous. There's certainly some discipline and financial responsibility. And so the main idea is to just try and use the points that you have, or try and use the spending that you're going to do anyways to generate points that can save you money on travel down the line.
Okay. And for those of our members that don't have access to U.S. credit, is there something that they should know about if they're not in the game to have a U.S. based credit card?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the big way outside of the U.S. to earn points is by flying. And so one of the things you can do, I think one of the other questions was actually about somebody had asked about the fare codes.
Yes.
This flight was G and this flight was J, and I missed out on a bunch of points. And so I had a resource I wanted to share. Basically, I don't want to get into the complexity. The fare codes, the letters that come with them, can be kind of confusing. But there's a website called 30K30 and then the letter K.com. And they have a free plugin for Google Chrome that lets you see how many points you'll earn when you're buying a flight. And I think the plugin will show you that on like Expedia and a couple of the other like big travel search engines. And so that just sort of takes the complexity out of it. And if you don't have access to earning points on U.S. credit cards, one of the ways that you can get some value when you're going to buy a flight anyways is to just take a look and see what type of miles you would earn. And a lot of times there's big differences. So in other words, you could buy a flight that's like $5 more expensive, and it's possible that you might earn double the miles for booking that flight. So there's definitely times where it can make sense to pay, $5 or $10 or $20 more and get enough points that maybe you can book a mostly free ticket the next time you travel.
So that's a resource that we have not had pop up in our community. So that's going to be gold for those folks that applies to. One question I wanted to ask that wasn't in our pre-work but has come up in the last couple of days. What's your take on like WOW Air, Scandinavia Air just announced some new flights that are budget friendly, but then you end up paying kind of out the nose if you want to bring a piece of luggage, if you need to buy food on the plane. Is that strictly for people that are willing to just bring on a carry-on and pack light, or is there ways around some of those seems too good to be true ticket prices?
Yeah, there's a lot of trouble with the way that those airfares are marketed, unfortunately, and in fact, in the U.S., they just sort of made some changes that are going to make it even easier for airlines to unfortunately sort of hide the final price from you until you get all the way through the process. So, there's definitely a big push and pull with consumer protection on that front. I think the big thing to keep in mind with the low cost carriers is that sometimes even if you do end up paying $50 or $80 for checked bags, a lot of times those prices can still be lower than the price of the flight with one of the big mainstream carriers. And so usually you can kind of see what the pricing is going to be. It's almost always better to pay for any checked luggage or any of those fees in advance. And a lot of times if you do that, if you cover those fees when you're booking the ticket, the overall price can still come out much lower. The other thing is that, hopefully with what we've already seen, especially with flights across the Atlantic from the U.S. to Europe, is that the entry of those airlines into that market, especially Norwegian and WOW, have put a lot of downward pressure on tickets from the big carriers like Delta, American, and United. So I think it's a really good thing, and I do fly on some of the low cost carriers. You got to be prepared, and it's definitely a little bit more of a headache to really get to the bottom of what you're going to pay. Right. But sometimes it can save you hundreds of dollars, and that may be worth it for a lot of people.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so the last question, Eric, is do you recommend travel insurance?
That's a great one. So there's a few things with the travel insurance, and this is also potentially going to be somewhat different for folks that are outside the U.S. than it is for folks that use rewards cards in the U.S. One of the big benefits, and one that's frankly just not talked about very much, is that a lot of the rewards credit cards in the U.S. have really good travel insurance that come with them. So if you book your ticket, and this can be a ticket that you book with points and you pay the taxes and fees with the rewards card, or it can be a cash ticket that you pay for the full airfare. And if you use the card, a lot of times you're going to have protection if your baggage is lost or delayed, if your trip is delayed. So coverage that if you have to overnight, they'll give you $500 towards a hotel, right, or any other expenses. So it's really worthwhile to just read the fine print, so to speak. It's actually not so terrible. You can get usually a PDF on your bank's website, or you can ask them to email it to you by giving them a call. And if you have that coverage, it can save you a lot of money not buying the travel insurance. But the thing that I would caution folks is you want to make sure you check who's covered. I have a really close friend that recently booked a trip for his girlfriend on his rewards card, and he knew the insurance coverage was great because he had used it a couple of times when his own flights got delayed. But because she wasn't actually his wife, she wasn't covered.
Oh, wow.
And she ended up having to do an overnight in Chicago. So there's the risk of some of those sort of gotchas. Typically, it's yourself or immediate family. And so if you're covered by that and you just take a few minutes to look through the terms, a lot of times the credit card insurance is actually better than the insurance that you can buy. So I would recommend using it if you have it, but be aware of those exceptions. Definitely folks that are friends or girlfriends or boyfriends, whoever you are booking a flight for that might not be covered on your card. The recommendation is either have them pay for their flight with their own rewards card if they have one, or do the insurance because it can be certainly worth it. And I also do like some of the insurance that's a little more comprehensive. I think a lot of times the ones that they try and upsell you on at the moment you book your ticket are not the best coverage.
Okay.
It's a way for the airlines to generate some extra revenue. So the ones that right before the checkout, it asks you to pay $20 or $30 or $40 to add insurance. If you are going to go the insurance route, I think that World Nomads is one of my favorites. I've used them a couple of times and had to go through the process of filing a claim, which was really easy. And that also provides some health coverage in a lot of cases with their plans. So that's sort of my go-to with travel insurance when I do need to buy it.
Awesome. That's such good information. Like now I can be completely responsible for bringing all of that value to our community. There are questions that are asked a lot, and I haven't had the answers. So that's great, Eric.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited that I am now a member, and I'm definitely going to be checking in with you guys. And so thank you so much for sharing this with me and sharing this with our community. I know there's a lot of people that could get huge benefit from I Am a Triangle. And yeah, I wish you guys the best of luck as you make this transition.
Well, we're looking at it that we all know how to relocate. It's something that we all do really well. So I'm challenging them to look at this move off of Facebook as another relocation.
So Naomi, tell me where folks can find you and join your community.
So our main website is iamatriangle.com. And if they're looking just for the community and not the resource site, that's iamatriangle.mn for mightynetworks.co.
Awesome. We'll have all those linked up in the show notes. Naomi, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experience and your wisdom. I'm sure a ton of people are going to get a lot of value and hopefully can be great contributions to the community that you're building as well.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that we have a newfound friendship and relationship. And thank you, Eric, for all of your value back to our triangles.
Awesome. All right. Talk soon.
Thanks, Eric.
Hey Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric